We are recording. Hey, good evening, everybody. It is Sanctuary Online, once again, coming to you with our summertime series. We're so excited to once again bring you our Meet the Artist series. So we have a wonderful evening of conversation and some good visual aids tonight, actually. And so we want to just welcome everybody that's here and thank you for coming. We know it's a summertime night. And Sanctuary, we weren't sure if we should keep on putting our evenings on, and then we thought, you know what, it's still the right thing to do. So here we are coming, building more community and meeting more artists. And I'm gonna give you a little bit of anybody who's new tonight. What we normally do, folks, is because we want to establish community, that's part of what we do in Sanctuary. We'd love you to stay on gallery view, keeping your cameras on. And if you'd like, you can go ahead and throw your names, where you're calling in from, in the chat box, maybe how you connected with us. And also, if you'd like a reminder text, especially because it's summer and we're not every Tuesday night anymore, if you put your phone number in there, or if you'd like to keep it private, you can toss it to Barb Crabtree and we will put you in our database. And Barb's got a nice little reminder every Tuesday saying, it's Tuesday, whether we're on or not. So that's how we'll roll. Man, I do want to say we have loved this Meet the Artist series. Many of you will remember Edie Disler, our first week, Jason, an oil painter, our second week. And last couple weeks ago, we had Shelly King on. Shelly is a vocalist, musician, an artist, and she has recently graced the cover of the Rolling Stone. And so it was a wonderful, wonderful time with them. We always want to say thank you to our last artist. So Shelly, we really appreciate her coming in here. We had a wonderful night of song and conversation. Also, just to let you know, we are about to close the auction. When Jason was here, he actually gave us a painting, donated one of his paintings for us to auction off at Sanctuary in the Woods. And please be on the lookout in our emails for final details on that auction. And to close up this month, meeting the artists tonight, Amy McCarter and Pat Ludwig are wonderfully here with us. And then July book conversation. Dear God, Cheryl will not put this book down. So it's called This Tender Land by William Kent Kruger. And Cheryl, if I asked you to say any words tonight, I'm sure we would not finish the rest of the show. So I won't, but that's going to happen on July 27th. Once again, our summer is full of books and artists, and we are really loving that. First, some introductions, and then Ken, I just want to prep you. I'm going to ask you, Ken, to start us off tonight. You know me, and everything in my world starts and ends somewhere with creating a life that matters, right? And there's a beautiful story about, well, let's see, it's called Big Mama's Quilt. I'll just put that teaser out there. And after I introduce Amy and Pat, I'd love you to start at the beginning about the creating of quilts and the joy they give us and the stories they offer us, all right? So tonight, Amy McCarter, dear God, I will tell you with full transparency, my friends, that we had some commercial quilters, some professional quilters that were gonna be with us tonight, and life happens, it always does. And it was funny, I was telling my mom tonight, I said, at that very last moment when that other person canceled, I'm like, I got to get somebody who I know that in a nanosecond can pull it together and bring us a phenomenal show. And Amy, that is who you always have been, a slight overachiever. And that's the pot, call the kettle black. I'm really clear on that. But Amy runs circles around most people in anything she decides to do. We actually met on a college dorm room our freshman year. And I'd like to offer some really powerful story, but really Sarah, who's also on here, I think Sarah, it was our job just to wake Amy and Sharon, there you are, Sharon, up on days of exams, like days when you actually had to go to class. We would bang on the door. They would give us their keys. Wasn't it, Sarah? I'm telling a straight true story. Ridiculous to these people who would, so I just always say, Amy, you're a very good sleeper.
We slept through 3 alarms. It was terrible. Woke up everybody but ourselves.
Yeah, the entire hallway. Since that time, Amy has had a little bit of success, and I say that with tongue in cheek. She's the principal and creative director of McCarter Design, something we are all so very proud of. It's a Chicago-based design and branding firm. And as you'll find out tonight, as Amy just shows herself to us, she says she loves to help clients develop their authentic brand by telling their story clearly and distinctively, and always leaving their audience wanting more of them. So Amy's forte is in brand development. I love your one tagline, Amy. You say you believe good design is good strategy. And as a business builder, I totally get that. And it will be no surprise to anybody who knows Amy to hear that at the age of 6, she received the coveted Best Artist of the Sherwood Forest Playground Award.
I have the certificate still.
So some people are clear about their passion very young in life, right? And Amy has always been clear. It's, you know, she has obviously won and been repeatedly recognized by many national and even international communication publications since then. But Amy, ever since I met you, color, images, type, you can see a G up there behind your back. I mean, you have loved color, images, type, anything to do with art, and to make that your life's work has been really just an honor to watch.
Thank
So,
you, Jody.
oh my goodness,
what a lovely introduction.
Well, and my just one of Amy and Sharon and Sarah and I are 3 or 4 members of the committee. We are college roommates who honestly mostly met our freshman year and have stayed in touch and vacationed, spouses, children, none of those, all our lives. And we still stay in touch with a monthly Zoom. So Amy, when I asked you to do this, you thought immediately of Pat, who was a connection to you through Sarah. And so I want to let you introduce Pat. And Pat, we are so honored that you said yes when Amy reached out of the blue and touched you as well.
Oh my goodness. I feel like I haven't done my research on Pat. Such lovely research on me. So I will tell you how we met and why I remembered Pat instantly. But I might let her give you some more background on just where she went to school and what she did and what her business is. But so yeah, I met Pat when she moved to Chicago. She reminded me just minutes ago that she befriended Sarah at where Sarah worked, a place called RVA in Chicago. And that was back in the 80s. And I just remember her being this incredibly artistic person who did these fabulous pieces of art in textile art in the fashion of quilts. And when Joby called me, I immediately thought of her. I'm a designer. I work with corporations typically, but I have this incredible love of collecting things and making things. I've been making quilts and pies and I don't know, all the rest of it for my whole life, really. But I'm not a professional. So I was a little crazy. I was thinking, oh, I need some help with this one because Pat, it's her thing. It's her life. She's a professional artist and sells her work. And there's a piece behind her. And by the way, it's one of my favorites. But anyway, so I'd like you to fill in the more logistical pieces, Pat, if you would, on yourself, because Joby did such a nice job for me.
Yay. Well, thank you for that warm welcome and that introduction. And thanks so much for having me. I'm happy to jump into the pool and share some stuff. I'm not a big promoter, self-promoter or media savvy or in any possible way. So it's nice just to get an opportunity to share with people. And I'm happy to do that. So I've been a journey person a lot of my life. And I think the quilts ultimately coming and settling in with quilts makes sense because it is, as Amy said the other day, a way of when you're piecing a quilt together, you're piecing your life together and you're kind of looking and taking a little bit of this and a little bit of that and making what works best for you. And that's what I try to do with my quilts. I'm a non-traditional quilter. I don't necessarily follow patterns. I mean, I really don't follow patterns anymore. I mean, when I was first learning, I'm self-taught. And when I first was learning to do it, I did a few basic patterns like flying geese and 9-patch. And actually the fellow behind me is kind of a star in the square basic Amish pattern, which I think is in the pictures that you put up the story.
In a few minutes.
Yeah. And but I really, it's expressionistic art really for me, but it's also always worked for me because it's been part of my life. Like my mom made my clothes for me when I was a girl, and was always sewing. She made the curtains in the house. She made all kinds of things. She upholstered. What?
You had it around you all the time.
I had it around me. Yeah.
I had it around me too.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's right. Your mom also felt. Yeah.
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
get that.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna pause you because
That's
we're gonna
fine.
bring this conversation all the way through. Pat, it was so much fun speaking with you this afternoon. And when Amy and I were chatting today, the way tonight's going to go is kind of the progression of quilting, how quilting started,
Yes.
and almost down to expressionist art, you know, from function to form to art. And we'll take you on a journey a little bit about there. And also for Eric and for Dr. Aaron and for Kay, I've got your photos in here in the middle. And so if you wouldn't mind, you know, giving us a minute or two on each of those. Ken, same thing. We wanted to make sure we had an interactive dialogue tonight. So Ken, why don't you start? Because it really does start with quilting does so many things for us, period. You know, love without words, right? And again, I'm just going to give it to you. And while you're speaking, Ken, I'm going to put a few pictures up that illustrate a little bit about what you're talking about. But why don't you give us the story of Big Mama's Quilt?
Sure. Yeah. Until I was 7 years old, I lived with my parents and my younger brother and my grandparents, Big Mama and Papa, in a big farmhouse in rural southern Mississippi. We had no electricity. We had no running water. There were 5 bedrooms in this big farmhouse, and each bedroom had a fireplace in it. That's the way we heated the house. And one of my earliest memories, and this memory is almost always about winter, the bedroom in the northwest corner of the house was empty, except that there was a big wooden frame that hung above, down from the ceiling in that room. And every Monday afternoon, a bunch of old women would show up. They would just come up onto the front porch. They would have hats on. They would have purses and gloves, and they would take those and put them in the living room. And then they would all move into this one bedroom where my grandfather, Papa, would have set a fire early in the morning to warm this room. And once they got there, then they started unraveling cords from hooks on the wall and let this frame down until it was just about 3 or 4 feet from the floor. And then they would all sit around the frame, and all these old women would quilt. They would sit and talk and quilt all Monday afternoon by this fireplace. And I was about 5 years old, and my brother was 4 years old. And one of our earliest memories is that once these old women would start quilting and talking, we would crawl under that quilting frame and lie down on the floor on our backs and look up. And from our backs on the floor, all we saw was just this cacophony of colors, just colored portions of of fabric and sewing and threads and all of these things hanging down. They made no sense at all. And almost every Monday afternoon, and with that roaring fire there and lying on our backs, little children, we would go to sleep. And we would go to sleep looking up at this pattern of just colors and this beautiful cacophony. And then when we would wake up, as they began to finish, we would stand up and then look at the quilt from the top. And from the top, it was this magnificent, beautifully, geometrically created, perfect design. The difference between looking up at it from the bottom and then looking down on it from the top was just a miracle to us. And later in life, as I began to preach, I became familiar with the smallest book in the whole Bible is one of the little minor Hebrew prophets. His name was Habakkuk. And Habakkuk lived about 500 years before the birth of Christ. And one day, literally, in the northern kingdom of Israel, Habakkuk looked up and saw the whole Babylonian army coming down on them. And Habakkuk looked up at God and said, I thought I was your chosen person. I thought we were your chosen people. Then here come these people. They're going to overrun us. And God took Habakkuk. In Habakkuk's imagination, God took him up on what is called a watchtower, a place above history, so that he could look down on history. Because all Habakkuk could see from the bottom was just this mishmash, this cacophony of events, which made no sense at all. But in Habakkuk's imagination, God places him on a watchtower above history. And when Habakkuk looks down on history, the Hebrew phrase literally means his bones went rotten. We would say he went weak in his knees because he saw, looking down, there was a magnificent, perfect pattern. Everything that was meant to be was happening. He could see everything that had happened before his life. He could see his own tiny little life. He could see everything that was going to happen. And it says he had peace in his soul because he understood that there was a grand design. There was a pattern which you could only see looking down from the top. And so for me, every time I look at a quilt, every time I see these magnificent patterns that people create, I remember that experience of lying on my back, looking up and just seeing this beautiful mishmash of things that made no sense, but then standing up, looking down and seeing this magnificent pattern that made perfect sense.
Well, thank you, Ken. And for any of you who have been a part of us with Creating a Life That Matters, you know, we teach that story that so many of us, when life is chaotic, you know, can we just raise our hand over the last 16 months? When has life been chaotic, right? And has felt out of control, that you allow that chaos to find the beauty in it, right, Ken? And then sometimes to step out and find order. And as we taught CLM enough, we realize some people have way too much order in their life, and they need to step in to the chaos and allow and find the beauty, you know? So it was a wonderful story that went both ways. And so thank you, Ken. I wanted you to tell that tonight because, you know, as we know, many of you here also read a book earlier this year with us called The Invention of Wings. And really quilting, Amy, we talked about this today, quilting started very functionally in slavery times, with the Amish, people repurposing, right, what they had, the leftovers, and using them to create function and form, and also to create story, though. And I think that's something that's what we're going to see tonight. Sue Monk Kidd wrote this book that spoke of a woman who she was born into slavery, but was able to escape, and her daughter was left behind. But one of the characters in the novel is actually this quilt that is a story quilt. And what Sue Monk Kidd said, I want to just read this to you. She said, above all, I wanted Charlotte's story quilt to speak about the deep need we have to make meaning out of what befalls us. I wanted to suggest how important it is to take the broken, painful, and discarded fragments of our lives and piece them into something whole. And I want you to remember that line as we talk to Pat and to Amy about quilts tonight. There can be healing and power too in giving expression to what's inside of us, in having our voices heard and our pain witnessed. A writer, Isaac Dennison, says, all sorrows can be born if we put them into a story or tell a story about them. So tonight, as we turn this over to our two experts in their field, I want you to hear the joy and the sorrow and the repurposing and the memories into these quilts that clearly are, Pat, you and I shared today, love without words, right? Love without words. So Amy, when Ken was telling the story about the boys seeing the quilt from both sides, I think I showed this one to you today. This is a quilt that is a cashmere quilt, right? That you're finishing right now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I should say that because you've been working on it for how many years? So
too many. I bring it out every like 6 months or 12 months and work a little bit on it, and then it goes away.
Finishing a quilt is like finishing a PhD, right? So maybe it gets done, maybe it doesn't. But this is the top of it, Amy, and then the bottom, and then even closer up, right?
Right. Yeah. It just, when you originally mentioned that story, Joe, I just wanted to show, something that was, they call this the top of a quilt. This is before it's finished, before a backing has been put on. And it allows you to see sort of, as you were saying, the kind of the chaos.
Yeah.
The chaos on the underside, right? It's so, the great thing about quilts is it's like such an amazing metaphor for life, right? It's
yes.
This idea that, this facade that we sort of put out for everybody, that we're put together, and we, we're figuring it out, and we're walking the road, but the underside is a little messier, and it kind of shows, how we're made, really. These are a couple images. I just, I think the process is important. Quilts are typically made in people's homes. This is my sewing machine in my living room, and I have them stacked up in bedrooms and in shelves, and I've got more than I could ever actually need, but I have a hard time parting with any of them. For this particular day, I threw some down on the floor of the room and photographed a few, just to be able to share some stuff here today. But I think really it's, even though like I'm a designer and I work in very corporate situation, like, in my daytime job, there's a part of me that's always wanting to make things and pull together the pieces of, the pieces of maybe a child's dress or, something else. And this particular one, this is also a topper that's not finished. This is actually an antique quilt, and it's silk, and something I found at an antique store or a rummage sale or something that I thought was graphically really striking.
So silk and cashmere for you, Amy, right?
Yeah, well, the cashmere one was the first one you showed, and somebody came, somebody told me that they had boxes of tailor swatches. Pat, you might appreciate this.
Yeah.
This is back in the 90s, and it was at Hart Marks, and they were going to throw them away. And like,
Right.
God, don't do that. I'll take them. And boxes were these cashmere swatches for tailers, and I'm like, one day I'm going to make a quilt out of this. So that's what this is. It's coming together slowly over time. But some of the other images that that I sent to you, Joe, were Amish quilts, which inspired my mom's quilting. And my mother's didn't start quilting until I started quilting, actually. I kind of got her into it, and then she became a professional. She was just amazing and prolific. She was a ceramicist, and when the boxes got too heavy to carry to art fairs, she started quilting. And this piece in particular, it's inspired by those very graphic Amish quilts. And she let me design this, and then she quilted, she made it, she pieced it and quilted it. And so it's kind of
insane, Amy.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites, just because it was a, kind of a collaborative effort, which meant a lot to me. But like I said, she didn't start quilting until she was probably around 60. And when she died early, she died young at 73. And we showed all of her quilts at the memorial service after the funeral, and there were 52 of them. So in the span of 13 years, she made 52 quilts, and they are all, and again, Pat will understand this, they're all hand quilted, which
wow, she didn't use a sewing machine?
No, she didn't.
Oh.
So they're close-ups you'll see in some of these, but basically she would, and for those of you in the room who are kind of wonder about this, you have to piece the fabric together first, and then you put a back on it, and then you quilt it. And the quilting is really the function of taking thread and adhering the top and the bottom together so that it becomes one piece, right? And this particular quilt is really cool. It's a Japanese tradition to use indigo fabrics and then quilt the quilt in white thread, which makes it just so dramatic. So that's what this is showing here. I don't know if you can get up close on that, but that's a kind of a fun technique. And her quilting was amazing. She just, I don't know, it's all she did in those years. I want to
show one, Amy. This is amazing. Now, and you're saying this was hand done.
Yeah, it's all hand.
Yes, I can't believe that.
Yeah,
that's a lot of work.
It is an amazing
lot of focus.
I'm going to show one more that your mom did, Amy. I want you to speak to this one. This is again the origin, and I've come out of most presentation mode so I can make these larger so you all can see them. So
yeah, sure.
That's
so
helpful.
When I sent Joby this quilt, this is called a log cabin quilt, the image on the right. And it's called that because it's many narrow pieces of fabric sewn together, much like the quilt that's behind Pat currently.
Yeah.
So she'll know about this. So one thing that's neat about ties is that they're all these, it's very long fabric, right? And it's sort of a natural fabric to use for log cabin quilts because all of these like small skinny little pieces. So these are all my dad's ties, and my mother, like most, I think, women over time that have been going back decades in the 1800s and in the 1920s and 30s and 40s, is you use what you have.
Right.
And my father would go through these ties and then he would stop wearing them, and it was what a waste. So she started cutting them up, and she made, I want to say she made 7 tie quilts, and this is one of them. And if you look at it, it's really cool. Joby, go back one slide really quick. If you look at that quilt, if you can see the red diamonds and the blue diamonds, so she would cluster the blues and cluster the reds so that you could see, like, overall these large diamond shapes, but essentially these are just squares that are sewn together. anyway, so yeah, you can go and take a look at those details, and you can kind of get a sense. And
These are all ties.
pardon me?
These are all ties.
They're all ties. And once she went through all my dad's ties, she worked a rummage sale, and she would just buy out all of this. When it got to the bag sale at the end of the rummage sale, where it's $5 a bag, she would just fill them with ties, and they're lovely and beautiful, but I'll say that they disintegrate over time. So and I think I was careful when I shot these that I didn't shoot the disintegrating parts, but you know, that's the sad part about these. You can't really use them as ruggedly as you would a cotton quilt. Yeah, but they're really, really pretty for sure.
When we were talking today, I was telling you, when everyone had whenever you all sent in pictures and you'd send in the finished product, like a big picture of the big quilt, then you'd always close up, and then you'd close up a little more. And on this one, Amy, when we were the reason why you sent this close-up picture, do you remember what you told me?
I did. Quilts are so intimate, and because usually the way we look at them is when they're pulled up around our chin in bed, right? And you know, we're drinking that cup of tea or we're reading that book, and this is the way we experience quilts when we're really using them. And you know, it's become such an art form that now we put them on the wall like paintings because they're so amazing. But really, the way that they've always been used is quite up close, where you're lying on it and writing in your diary.
Yeah, gorgeous, gorgeous.
Yeah,
I'm going to give you two just a moment, a breather. And Eric, you sent us a quilt, the same thing, Eric. You sent me the big quilt, then you sent me a little bit close up, and then this one with your hand. And I'm sure there's a story behind that. Can you speak to that?
If you look at where the hand is, you can see the hand stitching right below the blue, right along the,
Right here?
right there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is my great aunt Polly was in Knoxville, Tennessee. And it was my paternal grandmother's older sister. And I measured it just out of curiosity. I've never really measured the size. It's 56 inches by 70 inches. But it's all hand done, like, you know, like Amy's mother was doing.
Wow.
And the fabric in it, I have no idea. I guess it's dresses or shirts or whatever she had. But you know, it's just squares. And then I folded back, see the backing on it.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that was when you said something about quilts, that's I was the last one to get one of her quilts. My aunt, my father's sister, when my grandparents passed away, my father's sister went through the quilts, and her two children got first choice. My oldest brother, my middle brother, and then I got the last one. So,
well, you still got one, right?
Eric,
but I have one.
Still have it, Eric. Yeah.
I have no idea how old it is. I guess I could research on patterns of fabric and kind of make guesstimates, but
Wow.
But she died back in 78, so
Yeah.
it was long before that.
For bringing that into us. Ken, you sent us one as well. You sent a picture of, again, a quilt and a close-up of the quilt.
yes, this quilt came down to me when I married. My ex-wife's great grandmother made this quilt in about 1910 in rural southern Arkansas. And the quilt was made for her grandmother when she married. It was given to her. And then her grandmother gave it to her mother when she married. And her mother gave it to us when we married in 1965.
Wow.
I have given it to our son, Tom's and my son, and he has asked us to keep it and pass it on to our first grandchild who marries. We have 3 grandchildren. By the way, they're all coming to visit us this weekend. And so we're just like beyond excited to have all 3 of our grandchildren here. But this quilt, it has about, in fact, it has almost 2,000 separate pieces. Some of the pieces are as small as 1/4 of an inch.
Yes.
And
That's-
I did a count and came up with about 1,400 pieces, but there are more than that. And they are everything is hand sewed. It's just, it's a beautiful thing. We try to, we've got it, we try to take very good care of it. And we hope to pass it down, for generations to come.
Yeah, thank you, Ken. And speaking of good care, Kay, I'm trying to make these as big as I can so you all can see them. Kay, can you speak to this one? You got this when you were, it looks like it's framed now, so it might not be as big as Eric's quilt, but can you speak to this?
Yes. Well, I did not know that it existed for the longest time. It was probably in my late 50s when my mother told me that she'd had this in trunk and that her grandmother, so it would be my great grandmother, had made it for me when I was a baby. So I'm guessing that it's somewhere between 70 and 74 years old, since that's how old I am. And the 74 part. And most of that is all of the story of the Three Little Pigs is actually embroidered. So like all the pieces of it, the brick house is embroidered, all of that is embroidered. But my mom had it all that time, and then my mom actually had it framed for me, so for one of my birthdays. But I do know that this grandmother made lots of quilts. One of my other cousins said that she had lived with them, and so they had all kinds of quilts, much like the ones we've already seen in terms of what they look like.
The design, yeah. Oh, well, thank you, Kay, for sending this in. I appreciate that. And Dr. Aaron, you and I were chatting, and I just happened to say, I think you asked me if there was going to be Sanctuary Online tonight. And I said, yeah, we're doing quilts. Do you have any stories? And you're like, yes. And 2 seconds later, I had photographs.
So I went and found my nearest ladder, and I went up and I got my quilt down because this is the quilt. And so I just went and took a picture outside with it. But this was the quilt that everyone in my family gave Garth and I when we got married. And I just remember we grew up in Minnesota. We don't live there anymore, but it's very Minnesotan, and it's not my decor anymore in my house, but getting it out of the box was, I told Joby, like, thank you for giving me this opportunity to go down this emotional, memory lane, right? And I was just looking at all of their signatures, and inside of one of the squares, I found our wedding date. And so it just was the gift that you got when you got married. It was a quilt. And I remember how I felt. I remember feeling so loved that people would take that amount of time. And I could imagine them thinking of us as they quilted it. And I never learned how to quilt, but we have so many other quilts in our closet upstairs too. And I was like, Joby, and I was like, and then look at this one and this one and this one and this one. So they are very special.
Yeah, I think that says right. And what was fun with Aaron, you turned it over because I think you'd forgotten that they'd signed it, right? So you texted it back, and this one says made and given with love and our best wishes, right up there.
Mm-hmm.
And that just, I'm so appreciative of you all who sent pictures in, because I did my own quilting research. Who knew if we'd have a vibrant, rigorous conversation or not? I know these Sunday evenings, you never know how many folks are gonna pop in. And I went right to, to the AIDS quilt, right? To the stories, because those quilts were made to remember, to keep alive the memory, the lives of these people who, so many, in the story of the AIDS quilt. I mean, just Google away if you're in a quilting mood now. But when I was talking to Pat today, one of the things I learned was when they designed the AIDS quilt, and each segment was going to be 3 feet by 6 feet, or 3 feet by 8 feet. I'm trying to, not even sure anymore, but it's the size of a casket. And that's why each of the panels for each of the people was that size. And I don't know if any of you have seen it. We had, I think we had like 19 panels at MCC Toronto. And on December 1st, we'd pull them out and we'd hang them from the ceiling in our social hall. And you'd have to walk through them kind of like a maze, and just lights down low. And you couldn't help but go back to every one of those lives. And like you just said, Erin, the people who made them only made them to honor, you know, and those they had loved and lost. And what quilting has done, and Amy, both you and Pat too, I knew when I was asking you the favor of coming on that you're very, very busy people. And Amy's like, I can't do this, but I should do this. I haven't been quilting, but I should be quilting. I really have to say yes. And it was this, and I'm like, that's what Sanctuary is. It's about reminding us to get out of our ruts and remember our creativity, right? And what brings us joy. And so as we move on tonight, I just want to thank the folks who sent us quilts and stories in. And Amy, I'm going to pop through a few of the Amish slides and then down to the G's Ben slides, right? And then Pat, I want to make sure we have time because you've got some amazing work, and it's the progression of quilting. We saw so much similar in this first part, and then Kay, yours went to embroidery, right? Which is almost like hand stitching. And then here come Amy. Why don't you speak a little bit? You've done quite a bit of research, I know, on the Amish and on the beginning of quilting in the Amish community.
Is that better?
Yep, thank you.
Okay, and I'll run through this quick because I definitely want Pat to be able to show her stuff because it's amazing, really amazing. But Amish quilts, the Amish, the Mennonites, these are all religious groups, and they believe that they should never adorn their bodies and be vain. And so, but they love color. So all of their outfits were black on the outside and color on the inside. It was okay to enjoy color on the inside, not on the inside. So many of their quilts had a lot of black in it because it was leftover fabric, and then the leftover fabric from the inside. And so, Joe, you can just kind of bop through these, but this is the first one was like a diamond, their diamond quilt. And and Pat, you may know the proper name for these. This is a 9 patch on the far right, and then there's a name for the center one. What is it?
I guess well, it's the little squares, but they're all variations on the diamond in the square.
The diamond in the square.
Diamond in the square, yeah.
And they're very symmetrical. They're all square. Yeah. All of these quilts are square, but they're very simple. My cashmere quilt is inspired by the bar quilts. These are Amish bar quilts. But then, so this is all happening in these small rural communities of very devout communities. And meanwhile, down in Alabama, and Joe, if you go to the next one, there's a bunch of images here of quilts from a place called Gee's Bend, and it's in Alabama, not far from Selma, I believe. And these were all made largely by African-American women, again, using the scraps that they have. But what's so crazy about these is that they're much more organic than the precision that the Amish people were working with. But they're all inspired by these very traditional patterns. Like this is flying geese, but if you see flying geese traditionally, it's absolutely perfect. And yet these group of women just let it hang out. I mean, they're just lovely pieces of art. keep going through this, Joe. There's a couple more. Like, check this out. This is like a crazy quilt. This is a thing where you just take whatever scrap you've got and you sew it to the next one, and there's more of a design for the overall look of it, but not anything really precise. But the color here, the palette's amazing. I love this one.
Yeah, I love this one too.
Isn't this awesome?
This is just a 3D, right? It's like, Amy, when you hold it up close and it would be around you, you'd never know this.
Right.
When you step back, or like you say, we see so many quilts now as decorative wall pieces.
Right.
Then you see this and you go, oh my God, did they plan that?
Yeah,
You know?
this is every bit as good as any Vasarely or any famous or Mondrian. I mean, just really amazing. These women were they stepped outside the boundaries like true artists, and I think that these are an amazing segue to Pat's work, because when I look at these, I feel like Pat, you must be inspired by Geese Bend.
Geese Bend. Oh, absolutely. I was telling Joe earlier that it's there were a few things that brought me to quilting, but that probably, there was a show of their work at a bunch of their quilts were brought to the Whitney Museum of Art in New York in the early aughts, and it was an absolute smash. Everybody was talking about it, and
amazing.
If you go back just one to that last one, the next one back, it's kind of it's a variation of, this is a variation of another classic pattern of
The
log cabin. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was going to say, essentially, this is the exact same pattern as that tie quilt. And like, look how different they are.
Which one, Amy?
Well, that's the
tie quilt.
You don't have to go back to it. It's way at the beginning, but it's amazing. Yeah, this one.
Right. Yes.
It's the exact same pattern as that.
I went way back. Lordy, I went way
We're
back.
all the way back. I love this. And this,
right here. Play on one more time.
This is very nice too. I really like that.
I do too. I love it.
Right there. Woo.
Thank you. There it is. I didn't need to go
now we can see it. It's a variation on the same thing of the interior. Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's the exact same.
Log cabin. Yeah. Usually it has a red set. I mean, they're like classic, usually log cabin has a red center, and then it has the bars going around, and then you can and the bars might follow a color pattern, and then you can configure them different ways, and it produces different patterns in the overall quilt. This is essentially, this is what's behind me, actually.
This is the quilt that's behind you, right?
I love this quilt. I love the colors. Oh,
yeah, I'm afraid the picture, I didn't get a good picture of it because it's hanging on a wall, and this is a small space, but yeah, it's made from, harking back again to the Geese Bend quilters who worked with what they had, and not just the Geese Bend quilters, but women over time working with what they have, what's laying around the house. You need to make stuff you need to make a blanket to keep your family warm. You need to create some curtains to help keep out the cold. You need to make a cover to go over a chair that needs a cover. I did a commission. I make quilts for people, and I did a commission for a memory quilt for a woman whose husband had passed, and she had 2 grandchildren, and she wanted them to know something of their grandfather. And so she gave me all of his button-down shirts and asked me to produce 2 twin-size bed quilts from the fabric. And so, like, I work almost exclusively with clothing fabric and other cast-offs, and I cut off. But you can't sew a placket, or you can't sew through a seam. You want the expanse of flat fabric, right? So you cut off all those things. You cut off the cuffs, you cut off the placket, you cut off the seams, and you have a basket full of garbage. And that's one of the things that I can't abide. So I'm sort of a non-traditional quilter, and I've just tried to find ways to use all of these materials. And this is an early representation of that, because I thought, okay, I've got all these plackets, like you were saying earlier about the ties, these the button placket and the buttonhole placket, line them all up together. What I did here was I basically like sewed them all together in big squares, so I created a big square with the horizontal lines, and then I cut them through the center to then create that center triangle. And then the outer section is all cuffs, the cuffs from the
Perfect.
shirt. Anyway, and it's a flat piece, so it could go on a table. It could go, it's right now it's hanging on the wall. It could be used for a picnic.
But so Pat, when we hear of people using clothing, they would cut and use the finer fabric of the clothing, and this would be their cast-offs.
Yeah.
You took the cast-offs of the cast-offs
Yeah.
and to make, and I mean, looking at your work, it's beautiful. And I want to, for folks who are really interested in your work, because you are non-traditional, and Amy and I loved how the journey, of quilting, and it's just so amazing. And I have two more that I really want to show folks of your work, and I'm trying to make them really large so you can see them. But there's a really powerful story behind this one, isn't there, Pat?
Yeah. Well, what inspired this was kind of two things. Again, I reuse fabrics. I can't, if my son outgrows a shirt, I could give it to whatever, donate it somewhere, but because I quilt, there was a shirt with a picture of mountains. That was the first thing that inspired this. And then the other thing that just kind of happened one day is that my father passed when I was very young, and I often have thought over time and he died at home, and of that home. And every now and then, maybe there are a few others among you who look at real estate online sometimes just to look. And I sometimes look things up, and I looked up our old house, and the house was up for sale. And so thus there were pictures uploaded to the house, and I looked at it and I thought, and I went to visit it because it's in New Jersey and I'm not that far away. I asked to, the realtor showed me the house, and I was stunned when I went in because it was a time capsule. My father died there in 1970, and the kitchen was the same. The bathrooms were the same. And we were walking through the house, and then we step into the garage, and lo and behold, hanging covering the one window in the garage were these curtains that my mother made, and I recognized them immediately. And they're the columns, where you're scrolling down, those columns. If you go in, maybe you can see the pleating from when she made the curtains, where you make these pleats to hang them over the rod, like down under the on the other side where the maroon stripe is. You see these sort of pleats come down. Yeah, just under there, this area. Yeah, those, I don't know how to make curtains. My mother did, but anyway, they were practically falling apart. But the realtor, the agent I said, can I take those? Because my mother made them. And he said, yes, go ahead, and I took them and washed them. And I just felt I had to make something with them. And, but it also reminded me of my father passing. So it's kind of like the black section, it's expressing a number of things. The black section in the middle is the hole in the ground, the hole in our lives. And just looking at the mountains, looking towards the sky. And there's also thinking about what might have been, whatever. And there's also sort of a house in there. just above the rectangle of black. And it's like there's a little wisp of smoke coming up from the top. I put these together kind of expressionistically. There isn't necessarily a plan. I just want it to make sense.
Pat, when I heard you share this story, and when I was doing the research on, the invention of wings, and that bit from the author, from Sumont Kid, that we can bear any sorrow as long as we put them in a story or tell a story about them. I thought immediately of this photograph and your story here, and her concept of how putting sorrows and joys and deep feelings into quilts can be therapeutic, for us. So I thought of it immediately. And I know we're at the top of the hour, but Amy, we were luckily and lovely enough to begin with your story of your mother, and how, sometimes artistic expression or doing something together can maybe smooth over troubled waters, right? I mean, how many of us have complicated relationships with our parents? And Pat, I'm just going to toss this to you for this next one, because you brought me almost to tears. This wasn't one that stepped out to me. Pat's work is so amazing, and this one almost looked traditional compared to most of the other work you do, Pat. And then when you told me the story, I just said that has to be our last quilt of the night. And so if you would share maybe the little story of you and your mom, how you made the one quilt for her in her last years, and then this quilt when you showed it to her.
Yeah, my mom passed last year, and we had a complicated relationship. I mentioned earlier that my father died, and I have a brother, and times were not easy when we were young, and that carried forward. Anyway, I came to quilting in part, I think but it's always been a part of me that my mother sewed and she made my clothes. And, at the time when I got older into middle school, I hated that she made my clothes. I wanted Jordache jeans like all the other kids. I didn't want to wear these like denim things that she made from fabric she got at the rag shop. Anyway, but I came to appreciate more how much she did. So this is just a collection of a variety of scraps. And there's a feeling of kind of coming out of we lived in a lake community. It's called our Ship's Pass. We're going in different directions. We're not quite fitting together. The water in the center square it's a bit murky. There's a lot of muck in it, what have you. I don't know what else to really say about that per se. I wasn't thinking about it all that much, but it's just anyhow, but I wanted to show her this. It was the last one I made before I stopped quilting. I haven't really been quilting since last year when she became really ill. And I wanted to bring this over to show her, and I did. And we went into her bedroom, and I had fairly recently made a quilt for her bed, which we worked on together. And it was nice that she actually wanted me to do that. And I was glad that she wanted me to make something for her, and I was very happy to. But we brought it into the room, and she said, when I came in with it, she was like, oh, I don't want to mess it up in the kitchen, bring it in, put it on my bed. And I put it on her bed, but her room, she keeps all the blinds shut. So I'm like, let's open the blinds. And I thought, so you can see it, but then she really didn't look at it. She put her hands down on it, and she went all around sort of feeling the top. And, I use all kinds of funky stuff in the quilt. So like if there's a snap button or something, I just leave it there and I sew around it. And she's like, what's this? And it was a little snap. And then she kept going and checking it out. And she's like, that's really, she liked it, but that was when I learned that, okay, so she's losing her eyesight now too. It was, it was, but it was nice. I appreciated that she liked it. I was glad to have been able to share it with her. And it was a moment that we shared together,
I could just see her, Pat, when you were telling that story, touching it, because she could no longer see it and tell you what she thought.
Yeah.
When you were telling me this story this afternoon, I just got all like the hair on my arms just went up in the back of my neck. And you almost brought me to tears because she was doing the best she could.
Yeah.
Right? Feeling and back to Amy's comment about what, you know, those quilts when we wrap around them, and back to what Erin said, the love.
Right.
It's making that. And when we hold it close, we feel it.
Yeah.
We feel surrounded by those who made it, you know. I mean, just the everything she had losing, and she was near end of life, right? You had walked that journey with her, or we're walking that journey with her. And Jane Ann, I know you lost both parents last year. I mean, at those times in our lives, words are just so less than often.
Yeah.
But we're touching something you made.
Yeah, actually, I did think about that too. Actually, when I'm working with fabric, when I iron a lot, I love ironing. Ironing is so therapeutic. But I iron a lot, and I feel the fabric, I feel the hand of it and how smooth it is and so forth. And I do remember thinking, she's feeling what I worked on. She's rubbing her hands over everything that I smoothed out, and so it was a nice form of, you know, we didn't always connect.
Yeah, connecting for sure. That's
In
so
other ways, but
Yeah.
yeah. But it was a nice moment. So I'm actually very fond of that quilt, and I entered it into a show, and it actually got to the second round before the show. You know, COVID and, you know, all that stuff. But yeah, it's okay.
Cheryl?
That when you were telling that story, the feeling that I got with her touching it and so on, the intimacy of it was like she was passing on this mantle to you, and she felt like she had passed it on very well because you had taken over and you've done a very, very nice job of becoming a quilter like she is. And there's something that you share there that you can take on, that's a legacy. So
Yeah.
that must have been very satisfying for her as well, you know,
Yeah.
to feel that.
Yeah,
So
I
It's a
bet,
nice
even if she
nice
doesn't say it,
observation.
yeah, you know that she's feeling that.
Yeah.
legacy
Even if
piece.
she doesn't say, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, totally.
Because I don't
Toby,
always can. You know, I'm living in a family that just had a massive reunion this last weekend, and we were not a family that could say, I love you. My father never said he's sorry. He used the term ta. And I didn't understand that, but that was as close as it got for him to emote, you know, and I always try and remind myself that folks do the best they can.
Yeah.
And yet sometimes the touch or the nod, or like Cheryl saying, the appreciation. It's easy to say, I love this quilt that you made. And can you transfer that to take in, and I love that you made it. I love you. You know, those things
Right.
we have to connect the dots sometimes, because we're not all capable with words.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also felt, you know, like
Toby.
over the years, you know, when I make something, I realize how childlike it is, you know, like we still need that love. We need to have it reflected back to us. Like I brought her other quilts to show, you
Yeah.
know, I brought her lots of things, you know, that I wanted her to see and
Sure.
get her feedback.
And you've been trying to jump in, it looks like here. Do you have something to share?
yeah, I just wanted to say that, you know, this whole night has been very emotional, and what it kind of says to me, these quilts, people die under these quilts.
Right. So
Babies are born under these quilts.
Mhm.
Lovers go to bed angry at each other under these quilts, but love is made under these quilts.
Yeah.
And children are conceived under these quilts. And it makes them the coverings of our lives,
Yes.
you know, in just the most amazing kind of ways that just never occurred to me until I heard all of these stories tonight. I'm just so
Right.
appreciative of all of these stories. These quilts tell the stories of our lives.
Yeah.
Yeah. You said that beautifully. Thank you.
yeah.
Oh, well, on that, I do want to say, unless anyone else wants to add something, it is just it's a big feeling night, right? You're in your head thinking and feeling. I do want to say, and I'm going to show this really quickly if you want to take a picture of it. Pat, you do commissioned work, and all of our artists, that we've talked to have either maybe gained a commission or gotten someone that's interested in their work. And so Pat is one of those wonderful artists who isn't quite a marketing guru yet. So
yet, she used the word yet, Pat.
yeah, because I know we had a talk.
Oh, something else to do.
Yeah. But you can reach her obviously with an email and also with a telephone, but you can see a lot of Pat's work if you go to her Instagram page. I did that today, Pat, and you just are. I love this non-traditional. You use so much cool stuff to make your quilts, not even the ones we showed tonight, but beyond that. But it's just Pat Ludwig quilts, and just all one word.
Yeah.
So Pat, yeah, I really encourage folks to take a moment to head to your IG and take a look at that. I followed you today.
If you follow me on Instagram, we can keep chatting, and especially if the folks who are interested in quilts and quilting themselves and all of that. I have to warn you though, if you go and look, you might not see quilts initially at the top, because since last year I haven't been really quilting. I've been working with found objects and other mediums since, but I am coming back to quilting. I started sewing again today, actually. So let's see what happens.
I love that. I love that. I love that we've been able to reignite something that you and Amy, I know Amy, you have brought the love of quilting to our committee forever and ever and ever. And just every time we're in your house, I think there's a stack of them behind you. There's stacks and stacks and stacks. One day I want home.
Got plenty of those. I came to college with a quilt that I made in high school with 11 friends. There were 12 squares. We each did 12 squares and then we traded them. And so we each had one of everyone in our own quilt. And I wish I still had it today. I don't. But, that's one thing about these quilts expire because they're loved too much, right?
Right, exactly.
But, like fine china that's put away, we've got, you all gave us, when Cheryl and I were married, a quilt. It's just like back to what Erin said, it's being wrapped in that love, whether you look at it, whether you do all the wonderful things you shared, Ken, but whether you get them out, look at them, have a cup of tea in them, surround yourself and feel the feels, right?
Yeah, people connect around quilts. Oh, especially the quilting bees, right? With all of those women that sit around and share stories and tell each other secrets, and pretty great.
A voice. Yeah. Well, my friends, I hope we've ignited a little bit of quilting curiosity or love again in you. I researched, there's so much to learn about quilting, and these quilts earlier, Amy, that gave voice to the women who were seamstresses, right? They were born into slavery and were seamstresses, and they were not allowed to learn to read or write. And so they had to find voice, a way to tell that story through generations, the generations of their families. And they did that through quilting. So if you have not read The Invention of Wings yet, it's time. Okay. You can put that on your list, Pat and Sarah. And for the rest of you, just thank you. Thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for being part of the conversation. And thank you for being part of our summer series, Meet the Artist. Amy and Pat, can we all just unmute and give them real live love?
Yay! That's awesome.
Thank you, ladies. Beautiful work.
Thanks for having me.
Pat, for joining.
Yes. Thanks for asking me. It was fun. Yeah.
If
We
you're
can
new,
The notice go bell.
if we don't have your email address, you might want to toss it in the chat real quickly, Sarah or Amy or Pat, because if we'll do is we'll send an email out. We send an email each week, and it will have a little write-up on tonight, and it will have the link exactly to our YouTube channel where this can be found. So if you've got other folks who you might like to invite them to watch tonight's conversation with y'all. There are so many things in YouTube named Sanctuary. It's kind of hard to find us without the exact link.
Right,
I'll
right.
also send that to you over text or something. I'll find you. 'Cause I love-
Okay.
and
How do you toss something into the chat? I really am, I'm really, what does that mean?
Okay, so Pat, if you look down, if you move your mouse, there's a little chat icon at the bottom
Yeah,
of the screen.
and it says 5 right now.
Yeah, so if
Yeah.
you click on it, it'll open up a window
Thing, and I just type in. Okay,
and you just type it in.
okay, awesome.